this issue of affordable services, and then including reimbursement for things like marital therapy, parent training, those kinds of things. And then the last recommendation is to invest in research to inform knowledge and treatment. And again, hopefully our research will inform some of that as well. So next efforts in our collaboration, we're working with the Guard on a new initiative of the Guard. It's called the Road to Reintegration, which is the goal of that is to connect service members and their families to their communities. We're working on interventions for couples and families, really looking at some evidence-based interventions, especially for couples. Rural families, doing some work with rural families, finding out what their unique needs are. And then working to reduce mental health stigma at all levels, both within the military and without the military. Really want to acknowledge the National Guard and their families for their sacrifices for this country, for the state, and also for those who took part in our studies. So I guess I'll have open to questions, and I want to acknowledge the members of our research team as well in the audience, and hopefully they can answer some questions too if I can't. So
thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Very good. I just want to thank you. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to review, but this committee has been working on this issue for the last year plus. And at this point in time, we've got someplace nearly 30 pieces of legislation that have been trying to address the concerns. And have you had a chance to sort of review what we've been up to?
I've reviewed some of them. I haven't reviewed all of them.
Okay.
So.
I would really would like you to take care of that. And what we are trying to make sure is that there are, we recognize that there are certain things that are federal issues. After we were down at the McNamara building and took a look at the processing time, and we were hosted by a couple of veterans organizations and saw the challenges that these people are facing on records. We went over to the Ann Arbor healthcare facility, and I was very impressed, but the question gets into is how do you access the facility? It's not that the quality is not there, it's how do you get the access as far as programs going on.
Right.
Then we've been working on sort of what do we do on the rural healthcare component with the increase of CBOCs and those types of issues on a federal level, doing resolutions to make sure that there was access to those. And then sort of what the housekeeping issues, like you saw the bills on cell phone contracts and banking and a whole litany of problems that have been occurring there. But what you have had the opportunity to do is codify sort of on a study perspective, and I apologize. I talk to Chairman of the Board Ferguson every once in a while, and I just didn't know you guys were doing this because we would have had you in earlier as far as the process goes. But I apologize about the breakdown between the legislature and Michigan State, which we've had a rich history about, because this has been very, very helpful as far as things going on. My first question to you is there any, have you had a chance to take a look at sort of the Vietnam era or the Korean era, and are these numbers similar to those eras of?
I can't say like in terms of numbers because I think studies are different, but one of the concerns we have with the Vietnam era veterans is that their mental health difficulties did come out years after they returned home from Vietnam, and things like homelessness and drug and alcohol abuse were certainly quite common with it.
My sense is that at least there's a recognition, whether in comparison to Vietnam, there is a recognition of at least that there is the concern, which is different than what we, that was all sort of swept under the table in the 60s and 70s, and this is at least there's a recognition now. Whether the processes are any better, we'll see. Next question is, have you seen sort of with this sort of at least recognition with your family component, has that reduced the stresses? Has it reduced the divorce rates in families, or is that still an uncodified issue?
Well, what we've been doing is been part of family reunion workshops which occur 45 days after veterans return, and these are really fantastic workshops that the National Guard organizes, and we offer educational seminars, process groups, things like that for these families. Now, whether they reduce divorce rates or reduce stress, we hope to think so, but we don't have an outcome evaluation study of that. But certainly our concerns is that these are just workshop formats, and some of the issues need to be really addressed in more intensive settings, one-on-one settings.
Have you seen that this issue of the stigma, going to the seminars, since you have a group meeting, that reduces some of the stigma?
Yeah, stigmas, we hope, we
That
try
was
to...
a very prevalent issue. In
Yeah,
what
we
we've
try to
seen from
reduce
everybody.
stigma, but it's quite a difficult issue, you know, especially in some of these seminars where these veterans are seeing each other again for the first time, and then may not be... A lot of the great trainings that are out there that are delivered by the military, like Battle Mind and things like that, to reduce stigma, unfortunately occur in kind of lecture type of settings
Sure.
where it's kind of going through a PowerPoint presentation, and you know, not everyone's maybe paying attention to those kinds of things. So, you know, I think it's an ongoing battle, to be honest, the stigma piece. So.
Next sort of question on this issue of suicide. There seems to be less sort of drug utilization from everything that we've seen. Do you think that's had any effect on the reduction of the suicide rates once they get home? Because it seems like from what we've seen in the Vietnam era, there was a larger utilization of illicit drugs. And we've seen less of that in the battlefield conditions today.
Yeah, the statistic I'm aware of is that it's relationship problems that are contributing to suicide rates, and not necessarily the drug abuse problems.
Very good. And then the aspect of this high quality of care that you talked about, in the standpoint of, you know, I was very impressed with what we saw in Ann Arbor. I was impressed with what we saw at our veterans home in Marquette. Any thought processes on what sorts of things we need to be doing on the mental health side?
I think we need to be training mental health providers in all communities in working with these families, and certainly there's, I was listening to a story on the radio yesterday about the shortage of mental health care workers that's within the military, and I think really community mental health providers, whoever they are, need to be trained in working with these families, because you know, they may knock on their doors.
And then one other question on the post-traumatic stress disorder. Because of American technology, what we found was in World War II, for every death there were 2 survivors. Because of the technology, for every death there are 24 or 25 survivors in this current conflict. Are we making strides on sort of the uniforms, the protection of these guys, or is that still a big vacuum?
I don't know if I can answer that question. I don't.
Senator Basham?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate your testimony. As I understand it, a critical incident stress debriefing is a normal person experiencing an abnormal event, like seeing it, hearing it, smelling it, touching it, those kinds of things. And in fact, one of the ways of dealing with that event is critical incident stress debriefings, and that should be done within the first 72 hours of those horrific events. And there is a model out there. It's a Jeffrey Mitchell model. It's a 7-step process, and actually walk you through the event, and it's closed to people that are not part of that event. And actually, I've had a little training in it, and it actually does work. You can actually see it work. Are you aware that the military is doing the critical incident stress debriefings, and have they looked at the Jeffrey Mitchell model?
I don't know about the specific model. I was talking to somebody last week who was deployed, and they were talking about having debriefings in theater related to traumatic events that occurred there. I think they have the in-theater traumas that occur and the debriefings that may occur there. What we don't always know about is this PTSD that has a later onset, maybe a year or 2 after a veteran returns home, and you know. But I do know that there is stuff that's happening in theater, but I wouldn't say I'm an expert on that though at all.
I know. And I was an employee assistance rep at Ford Motor Company for a number of years, and I know we had trainings dealing with issues in plants and stuff, and actually it was part of a peer review team that would go around